Welcome back to KUOW's Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. At the start of every week, I sit down with another journalist to talk about the biggest news developing right now and how it affects the Pacific Northwest. Today's guest just biked here all the way from City Hall, where he covers this new mayor's administration and a lot more going on at City Hall. David Croman with the Seattle Times. Thanks for jumping on. And how was your ride up here?
It was good. It was a little steamy, but good. Yeah, not too wet.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate that. Appreciate your hustle. We're going to get to our top story on Front Page.
I believe that all of you are willing to welcome well-run shelters with wraparound services in your own neighborhoods and places that you live, work, and spend time.
That is Mayor Katie Wilson. She was talking about the 75 new micro units of shelter that are coming to Seattle's Inner Bay neighborhood by June 15th, according to the announcement last week. That's part of this push to get 500 units of shelter open by the time the World Cup starts in June. Wilson is at this milestone, David. And, you know, we love as political wonks and reporters to talk about the first 100 days, 3 months in office. It's kind of when the politicians lose their honeymoon sheen and we start to be like, okay, but what about those promises?
Yes.
Right? So what do you think about, let's start with the shelter component of this, like in terms of how she's doing in progress on the big promises that the mayor made.
I think she and her administration, I know she and her administration see this as probably the defining issue of their, especially the first year, but probably their whole term. Her chief of staff told me, basically, if we cannot deliver on this promise, I have a hard time seeing how we gain momentum on the rest of our agenda. And I think that's right. I think it's a calculation that, we declared a state of emergency in 2015 around homelessness. On the one hand, there's been some progress just as far as how much housing has been built. But on the other hand, I don't know that anybody in Seattle, not that many people in Seattle, are necessarily satisfied with the state of things today. There are still more people living outside than there have ever been. And I think they see kind of their entire agenda, if they can be the mayoral administration to actually have the city of Seattle feel differently and have more people actually move inside, they think that is going to kind of define their term as a success. And I think they see basically everything else that they want to accomplish is flowing from that.
Yeah, so it's a big deal. I mean, for this administration,
yes.
They're trying to stay on track for 4,000 units over the first 4 years, which is an incredible pace.
Yes.
I mean, Bruce Harrell ultimately, when he was trying to keep pace with a lot of the COVID money going away, he barely increased the total number of shelter beds in his first 4 years. Now, this setup is a little different. Again, he was coming out of COVID, but 1,000 a year? I mean, is that even doable by anybody?
It's an open question. They see their number one obstacle as being money, and I think that's appropriate because it's going to cost a lot of money to do this. Because, there's a kind of a few layers to this, because there are tiny home villages in Seattle that are successful. They're in neighborhoods and they seem to have a good relationship with the neighborhoods. A lot of those, though, are fairly low service oriented. They have these are folks who might be a few paychecks away from being back in a permanent home, and those are relatively easy to stand up because you don't need a lot of resources surrounding them. For Mayor Wilson's plan to be successful, these shelter sites have to have a lot of resources behind them because the serving folks who just need a place to stay is kind of the quote unquote easy step. The more difficult step are all the folks who need maybe mental health resources or substance use resources, and
which these 75 units are going to have those wraparound services, but it's super resource intensive,
really expensive to do. I think it is maybe it raises the concerns of surrounding neighborhoods a little bit more. They're concerned about what is this going to mean for our neighborhood. But yeah, they think that they can find space. They're they hired a broker to come on and help them find private partners that they might be able to work with. They think that they can find staffing, but the number one thing is, for a high acuity shelter bed is going to be somewhere around $50,000.
Wow.
They think right now they probably need at least $17 million just to kind of operate 1,000 units a year. So we're talking not just about a lot of startup costs, but ongoing costs. Because the kind of the tricky thing with this whole shelter goal is that there is not really a plan for what comes after that. And they're aware of that.
But that was for a long time kind of the barrier to getting shelter beds up and running, because the idea was, well, we don't have the transitional housing. We don't have the permanent setup for people to kind of bridge from the shelter beds.
Yes.
And so now this pendulum has kind of shifted to be, well, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We need to get people literally off the street, right? And that's where we're at now in terms of Wilson's promises.
Yeah, they are urging the public to compare 4,000 people living in shelter to 4,000 people living on the streets. And by that metric, they're saying it is preferable for those people to be in shelter. That doesn't answer the question, though, of what comes next. And because this is supposed to be temporary shelter. It is supposed to be transitional. And you're right. For years, Seattle was sort of going all in on, it's not a good use of our time and resources to be building transitional shelter. We should be focusing that on housing. Mayor Wilson is coming in and saying, sure, I agree with that, but if we can actually make a difference in how it feels on the streets of Seattle, that will give us a lot more political latitude to kind of move on to those next steps. And we think we'll get a lot of credit from the public for making a real difference on that. Again, though, you do run the risk of essentially creating a lot of Hoovervilles around Seattle, sort of quote, temporary shelter that
we call them Nicholsvilles.
Right. Yes.
Sure.
Nicholsvilles here. Temporary housing that becomes permanent. But again, the pitch they are making is that is preferable to those folks living outside under freeways in the public right of way in front of businesses.
Yeah, I guess Wilsonvilles would be the updated
right,
version.
Yeah, exactly.
Before we go, to move on to the next story, I'm curious what you think of the 100-day mark. You cover this administration very closely, and do you like assessing people after 100 days in office? And do you have anything else that you're kind of watching with Wilson, particularly at this milestone?
I tend to match what the politicians think. If they make some big promises of I'm going to do this in 100 days, then I will hold them to account to that. Other than that, I feel like it's a little symbolic. I will say that the Wilson administration has not really tried to use the 100 days to be some sort of sprint to some big policy mandate that they have. Part of that might be because they won by so few. They understand that whatever mandate they do have is pretty narrow. And
they're really using the World Cup as sort of the benchmark
exactly.
instead.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. That's a backstop, a sort of light that they can work towards. I will say that my impression so far of the Wilson administration are, I guess I'm not surprised. I think there was a expectation by some, particularly on the national sort of conservative sphere, that she would come in. She a self-described socialist, that she would come in and be sort of this radical lefty. I think President Trump called her a communist. She is not so far governing like that at all. In fact, you hear some pretty positive reviews so far from people who opposed her election. Some of the business community feel like, at the very least, she is engaging with them and being thoughtful.
And you see a lot of backlash on the left, at least. I don't know. I watched the town hall on March 27th where she sat down and took a lot of questions about her threading the needle on surveillance cameras. And there's a huge amount of anger at her from people that are naturally the types that helped get her elected on the left.
Yeah, and sometimes literally help get, people who worked on her campaign, I have heard from, who have been a little bit frustrated on that. I think they are calculating, again, back, to close the loop on the shelter piece. I think they are calculating that that is the thing that they really need to focus on, and they, I think, are trying to avoid getting into too many drawn out political fights over issues that they don't see as being sort of defining for their term. I think that's frustrating to some people who heard her on the campaign trail around surveillance and make promises that they don't see her delivering on. But I think they are sort of trying to narrow their agenda down to a few very key things. And a lot of that stuff is stuff that the business community and a lot of the city has wanted to see her fix.
We've got a couple more stories here. I'm going to roll through, literally jelly roll through to the next one.
Good Lord, I'm feeling lighter.
Okay, that is a song called Lighter, which is the official FIFA anthem for this World Cup in 2026. It is by Jelly Roll. You're welcome now that you know that. Just really quickly, you learn something on Front Page. New every day. the World Cup obviously coming to Seattle. We're hosting 6 games here. You wrote over the weekend, along with your colleague on the business desk, that some of the expectations for how much economic benefit Seattle is going to get from those World Cup visitors have been downgraded. The expectations have been downgraded. Just really quick, what's going on there, David?
I mean, I think in short, it's you're asking people to come to the United States at a time when coming to the United States is perhaps a little complicated, particularly if you're from, we're hosting a lot of, Egypt and in theory, Iran coming to the Seattle to play their games, Qatar too. So you're asking people from,
Australia,
to travel across borders to come to the United States at a time when I think maybe there's less international appetite to do so. So as a result, organizations like Visit Seattle and the city's economic analysts are saying, we had these close to $1 billion projections for what it would mean economically for Seattle. We're going to downgrade that, not hugely, but somewhere around 10%. And I think that more significant than perhaps the actual number is the sort of softening of the significance of this event. I think they still think it's going to be highly significant, but just maybe setting expectations a little bit that it is sort of a tumultuous time right now. I think hotel bookings perhaps too aren't seeing quite as much appetite for them. So just kind of tempering expectations around what it means to travel to the United States right now.
The interesting thing I found from your story was that they don't expect an overall drop in the total number of visitors. It's more about the mix of who will be arriving. So you'll have more domestic travel, less international travel, and international travelers tend to spend more.
Yes.
When they stay longer, they spend more at hotels and restaurants and things like that. So that blend being a little bit more domestic will be a hit to the expectations for this huge event.
Because if you're coming in from overseas, you're probably going to stay longer in Seattle than if you were driving up from San Francisco or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Canadians also not coming and they have games in Vancouver anyway. But moving on to our final story on Front Page.
We're going to count down from 51. No, we're not. Here we go. You ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here it is.
Oh, Rick Riz unveiling the Ichiro statue. It was a sunny, beautiful day on Friday in front of T-Mobile Park. A lovely spring morning, and disaster strikes. David, this is, Mariners legends looking on, Ken Griffey Jr., Edgar Martinez pulling off the blue tarp or curtain or whatever it was off of that iconic number 51 in his batting stance. He's sizing up the pitcher. His right arm is holding the bat outstretched towards the mound. At least that was how it was supposed to look, because instead it was just a cracked bat flopping to the side. And I repeat that, Ichiro in all of his glory with a cracked bat was the image of the day. I don't know. I mean, how many times can you die of vicarious embarrassment? Because that's what happened to me on Friday when I watched this video. Your thoughts? We have, a couple minutes to just absolutely wallow in embarrassment.
Especially because Ichiro, I would love to see how many times Ichiro actually broke his bat while swinging. It was probably very few. That was his whole thing, is that he was so contact oriented. Up until that availing, the Mariners season had been going really badly. It was really bad vibes. And so this was just like of course.
We were close to the bottom of the barrel in the MLB. Yeah.
Ironically, since that bat has broken, they've played really well. So I don't know. Maybe this is the sort of omen that they need, the kind of reset, a clean break, so to speak.
Oh, no. Somebody on Reddit got to that ahead of you, David. They say last year we had the Etsy witch. And this year we have the broken bat. Because I just did quick math, since the bat snapped, the Mariners have snapped a 5-game losing streak. Over the weekend, they scored 23 runs in 3 games against the Astros. And the thing I just do not want to hear from you is, was that the Astros pitching staff being one of the worst in the entire league and barely having a bullpen to even like finish out the game. I don't care. I don't want to hear it from you, okay?
Yeah.
All I want to know is that there's some kind of mystical element to the bat snapping and us snapping the slump.
Yeah, you still got to beat the bad teams. You know, I mean, that's no easy feat. So,
Sure.
yeah, let's take the wins when you can get them.
Were you a Mariners fan in 2001 when Ichiro joined the league?
I was, yep.
You're a couple years younger than me, so I couldn't tell if you would be conscious at that point.
95 was my Mariners awakening, and I've been a fan since.
Oh, that's a good year. That's a good stretch.
Yep.
The jokes after the bat broke were some of my favorite. Ichiro said, I didn't think that Mariano Rivera would come here and, go to that far as to break my bat. The other one I loved is, the Chicago artist who created the statue is named Lou Sella. And by the way, the pictures of Sella watching as the bat is unveiled, broken, are priceless. His face is like horrified. But Ichiro came and modeled for him in person, wore the 2001 rookie jersey, and his comments at the press conference after the unveiling were, I took the time to get this right. I modeled my rookie jersey. I don't think Griffey or Edgar could even fit into their rookie jerseys. So he still had some...
He's got that sharpness to him.
Yeah, he still had a little sass going on. Well, they've apparently fixed the bat. I want to know what was different about the Ichiro bat, because Griffey and Edgar both have bats in their statues, and for some reason this is the one that breaks.
Yeah, I couldn't tell. It looked like it actually broke as a result of the curtain being pulled off.
The curtain, yeah. So there's got to be something significantly wrong there. David Croman, your bat is still, not broken, and you're here. Your bike is not broken. You got here to join me for Front Page. I really appreciate you, and thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime right here online at KUOW.org, or, of course, on your favorite podcast app.